Hello pandas of the internet, my name is Panda-chan. I'm a full-time artist-ish, a part-time cosplayer, and at times a less than stellar GM. I personally have run and failed to run a couple of games in my time. To be completely honest, I don't think I'm the best at it, but I still try my best. Today's horror story is more of a pep talk from a GM to anyone who will or is running a game. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it. This RPG horror story was submitted by Tom Opry. Make games with your players, not war. Hey everyone, I wanted to share an old story about one of my first campaigns I made all by myself, and how I doomed it. So, this was maybe my first year of high school, hard to remember, but it was right after my buddies and I had played through the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition, and we were hungry for more. The Lizardmen of Lustria will always have a special place in my heart. Come on, they're dinosaurs riding dinosaurs into battle. What's not to love? So I wanted our next campaign to be in Lustria. To summarize, the Lizardmen are one of the orderly factions that oppose chaos, but get a bad rap with all the other enemies of chaos due to their savagery. I wanted the campaign to be focused on humans, elves, and dwarves, learning what powerful allies and insightful friends the Lizardmen could be. I got super excited and wrote out the entire campaign, but I was under the impression I was being smart about it. I didn't want a linear campaign because I knew my players, especially my brother, would try to find a way to derail it as soon as they felt they were being railroaded. So, instead, I wrote up a series of conditional outlines, each outline triggered by the players interpreting specific events, arranged not in a linear fashion, just scattered across the jungle, left to chance and the player's skill to find, as evidence of the railroad, and thus the point where specific players would attempt to jump the track. Why not kick the disruptive? I was 14 and no social butterfly, and besides, I wanted to outsmart them. So fucking funny in retrospect. You cannot outsmart someone who is deliberately playing the fool. Anyways, I'm not going to go into detail about the conditional plot outlines beyond saying I did enough work to have over 30 of them, and many of them were flexible enough to be combined with other trigger events. Each was my attempt to generate new plot complications, as I called them, which would explain the sudden change in some of the PC's behavior once they started trying to jump off the road tracks, while also creating new events and circumstances for the party to deal with. It was a lot of work, but I enjoyed it. It was an earnest and vigorously thought out effort, and obviously it was doomed from the start. Why? Because I failed to imagine that the narrative thread that would start the campaign, the tiny little introduction that explains why half a dozen socially maladjusted adventurers would each want to join forces with a bunch of strangers before wandering into the most dangerous jungle in the setting, would itself be the evidence of railroading. Yes, my brother was, and for all I know, still is one of those players who expects the GM to literally create an entire open world for them, and anything less is railroading. At least he acted that way in my campaign. And so, my brother, who was playing a heavy-handed mercenary captain who wore gauntlets with steel knuckles on them, caved in the skull of my kick-off the campaign quest giver in the first 5 minutes of game time. A geriatric old lady who was making a fortune off of working with the local scaven to send adventurers to permanent deaths after earning their trust. It was literally the first choice he made as a player character. Didn't even wait to introduce himself. I was so shocked I kind of forgot to be upset about it in the moment, but I also forgot how to do anything to adapt to the new development. I could have just made up another half-endearing, half-creepy old person and just proceeded ahead. I could have turned the town guards on my brother's PC and severely complicated the start of the campaign with a trial or a prison break. I could have had the Skaven attack the town after losing their key asset, thus making a siege scenario for the party to unite within. I could have done some combination of any of these things. Instead, I just said, well, I hope you all enjoyed yourselves, and closed the campaign then and there. I didn't complain about it, though I probably should have, but I also didn't make any more campaigns for almost a decade after that, and I was still silly enough to let my brother play in one more campaign. It just goes to show you cannot outsmart or outplan a hostile player. It is a fool's errand to even try, and to apply yourself as much as I did to the task jeopardizes more than merely the one campaign. Burnout is real, and hostile players will trigger it if you don't set and enforce boundaries. Now, I could and did blame only my brother for my burnout, but I also want to take the time to point out this isn't the whole story. Yes, my brother was a large part of it, the decisive part in fact, but he can only play the part because I had already set myself up in opposition to him. I was the one, not he, who planned an entire campaign not around the enjoyment of my players, but around the goal of outsmarting one of them. This is ironically one of the stupidest things a GM can do, and possibly the stupidest thing I have ever done. It's just so pointless. I was the one who set the table, knowing one of the players I wanted to serve a 30-course meal to would attempt to rip the tablecloth out from under all of my work at the first opportunity, and I immediately got the outcome I had set myself up for. Blaming my brother alone for totally ignoring how I really did this to myself. And it wasn't until I realized this that I could get myself to GM a custom campaign again. Ultimately, the GM's best aid is the reminder that they only have control over their own actions and what they tolerate at their table. No amount of planning, communication, or vigorous enforcement of the rules will ever truly contain a player who is simply hostile towards the GM and their efforts. The humble but painful thing I should have done was establish to my brother long in advance that his behavior in prior campaigns made him unwelcome in any campaign I'd run, at least until the behavior changed. Don't learn what I did the hard way. Respect yourself and your table, set boundaries and stick to them, instead of taking on the toxicity of others as your personal challenge to conquer. Whenever you go to war with your players, your own ruin will be the outcome. TLDR, as a young GM, I cared more about outsmarting my brother than having a fun time, and my campaign died in its cradle due to my shock at having been a massive dumbass. That brings our horror story to a close. At times, people who are well into their 30s act and react in immature ways, so I don't think a 14-year-old being upset at someone disrespecting their efforts is at all out of character or out of line. I don't think I would have reacted any better than you did back then. In fact, I would probably react worse. But I am happy that you have healed and learned from the past, and I am grateful for you sharing this with the aspiring GMs of the internet. But with that, I would like to remind you to subscribe and ring that bell and leave me a comment telling me when you first started playing ttrpgs. But that being said, I will see you next time.